If you've been following along with me for my Homebuyer 101 series, we have moved from finding the right realtor and getting under contract with that realtor, getting pre-approved with a lender, then figuring out the criteria of the home you want to search for, starting and doing the house hunting process. And today we're talking all about finding the home you love and going under contract. Making an offer on a home involves both paperwork and strategy, and that's why it's so important to be wise when making the right choice for hiring your buyer's agent. They're going to be the ones to guide you through this whole process. Now let's talk about what to expect. When you're making an offer on a home, it is crucial to start off by knowing what type of market you're working in, whether it's a strong seller's market, a buyer's market, or a balanced market. When I'm helping my buyers make an offer on a home they love, I let the type of market that we are in guide me as I advise them in how to craft their offer. So let's talk through the different terms that are typically in a contract to purchase a home. First up is pricing. You don't want to just wing it on the price. Your realtor will run a comparative market analysis called a CMA to look at recent sales in the area. These are your comps or comparables. You want to make sure what the home should be priced at and what it should appraise at. This is all about making sure that you're paying a fair price for that home. In a strong seller's market where there is a chance for multiple offers, you're probably looking at offering at or above list price. With my clients, we discuss what that particular home is worth to them and what fits their budget. I always make sure my clients are in a position where they're not going to overextend themselves with their offer price. In a buyer's market, or maybe even if a home has been sitting on the market for a while, you may be in a position where you can come in below their asking price and then work on negotiating. A strong offer isn't just about the money, however. You can also make your contract more attractive to the sellers by kind of sweetening the other terms in the contract. One of those terms is the earnest money deposit amount. Now, I'm going to cover more about the earnest money in a later week. But for now, just know that you're going to be offering a deposit called earnest money. This is a good faith deposit that shows you as the buyer are serious. The amount of earnest money deposit you're going to offer, you'll need to discuss with your realtor. It can be common to offer about 1% or more of the sales price. In South Carolina, buyers have a time period called a due diligence period. This is their time to do further inspections and research into the home and area to determine that they want to move forward with that property still. In South Carolina, that is typically 10 business days. However, if you're needing to make your offer stronger to the sellers, you could always consider shortening that time period. A seller might like this because this may shorten the time that the seller has to keep the home off the market while they're waiting for you to decide. I can usually give my buyers a good idea up front if it's going to be helpful for them to shorten their due diligence time period or not. When you're making your offer, you're going to need to go ahead and decide on a closing time frame. I like to recommend to my buyers that we reach out and find out if the seller has any specific needs for the closing date. Maybe they need a quick closing because they're relocating. Typically in our market, a closing is about 30 days, but we could reach out to the lender in this scenario and find out if they would be able to close the loan sooner than that. And if so, we could offer the seller a closing date that is shorter. Maybe they need a longer closing time frame, like if they're building a home. In that scenario, you could offer to do a 60-day closing to the seller or even suggest offering a rent back period to the seller for a short time after closing. Either way, being flexible to the seller's time frame that's needed for closing can win you points. If there are items of personal property that you are wanting, those are things you can ask for in a contract. Like maybe you want them to leave their fridge and washer and dryer or their swing set. But sometimes not asking for extras can make your offer stronger and cleaner. So those are some things you'll want to weigh out with your realtor. Buyers may also ask sellers to pay for a home warranty for them or pay some or all of their closing costs. In a hot market though, just keep in mind these sorts of requests can weaken your offer. It can be common, especially with first-time home buyers, that they need the seller to help them with paying their closing costs. So one way you can do this to still keep your offer stronger is to add it into the sales price of the home you're offering. For example, if a home is $300,000 and you need $5,000 in closing costs, you could offer a sales price of $305,000 with the seller giving back $5,000 towards your closing costs. This still nets the seller the same amount of money as if you'd offered that $300,000 sales price and no closing costs. This way, you're just adding that $5,000 into your loan rather than having to bring it all up front and paying out of pocket at time of closing. Okay, so those are the basic terms normally in a contract to purchase a home. Now I want to look a little bit into the contingencies that you'll often see in a contract. Once you get past due diligence, there's a couple other contingencies still at play. There's the financing contingency. While you're under contract, the lender and their underwriters are working together behind the scenes to make sure that they can work to get that loan approved for you. If your loan does get denied for some reason, you as the buyer are actually able to walk away from the contract because the contract was written contingent on that financing approval. Next, there's an appraisal contingency. The lender is going to order an appraisal to be done on the home. This is to determine that the home's value is actually worth what the lender is going to be lending you with that loan. If for some reason that home does not appraise at or above the purchase price, you as the buyer can try to renegotiate with the seller for a new purchase price, or you can actually walk away from the contract because that appraisal contingency is in there to protect you. Your realtor is going to discuss all of these terms and contingencies with you, and then will fill out the contract for you accordingly for you to sign. Your agent will then submit your contract offer along with your pre-approval letter to the seller. This shows them that you're a qualified buyer. Next is time for negotiations. So once your offer gets submitted to the seller's agent, one of three things can happen. They can either accept your offer, reject your offer, or counter your offer. If they accept your offer, this means that they are signing the contract as it is with the exact terms and contingencies you submitted to them. Congratulations, at this point you are under contract. If they counter your offer, that means they have come back to your offer with sort of an offer of their own where they have made some tweaks and changes to some of the terms or conditions of your contract. Your agent will discuss these changes with you and you'll decide if you want to accept that new offer or counter back with something different. So at this point, you can actually go back and forth between the buyer and seller for a few different rounds before things get finalized. But one key tip I like to remind my buyers of is that time is of the essence when you're negotiating a contract. You never want to drag your feet when responding to the sellers, especially in a hot market. Until everything has been agreed upon, signed, and ratified, that home is still available for another buyer to come along and make an offer. The last response is that the seller could reject your offer. If this were to happen, or if you were to get beat out by another offer, then it just means it's time to resume house hunting. If the seller does happen to receive multiple offers, you may get a request from their agent that they are requesting a highest and best offer. This simply means that the seller is requesting all interested parties to submit their highest and best offer by a certain date and time. They'll then look through those offers and choose the one that they want to move forward with. This can sort of feel a bit like a blind auction to you, the buyer, but just know your realtor should be able to sort of advise you in this process whether you should leave your offer as it is or up it. Just remember to stay level-headed throughout the process. It can be easy to kind of get fearful or worry about missing out and end up overpaying for the home. I always make sure that my buyers don't go above what is wise for their offer price. And remember, you do have that appraisal contingency in there as a safety net to protect you from overpaying. So when the time comes to make an offer, you will be ready and your realtor will be there to make sure that it's a strong one.